Hi, gorgeous, and welcome to the Confident, Energized, and Sexy Mama Show. I am Dorit Palvanov, your host, feminine energy expert, health coach for women, registered holistic nutritionist, and the creator of the groundbreaking health and mindset program for moms, Energized, designed for perimenopausal women who are done having kids and are ready to get their confidence, energy, and sexy back. Ladies, think about it. What would the world look like if, as women, we stopped being so harsh on ourselves and instead felt more energized, powerful, confident, and more connected to our bodies? What if, as women, we honored the fact that we are built and wired differently than men, and being different does not mean being inferior? That the go, go, go mentality, alongside doing more to have more without ever pausing and resting, only leads to chronic stress, anxiety, burnout, overwhelm, lack of joy, and corrodes our health, relationships, and vitality. What if, as women, wives, and mothers, we had the courage and confidence to desire more? More freedom, power, energy, joy, abundance, pleasure, fun, play, and sex, all on our own terms. Mama, you deserve to feel good. You deserve to form healthy relationships, and your body needs, craves, and deserves pleasure. This is your birthright. You're here because you believe in your feminine energy. You're here because you care about health and the environment, and you're not afraid to take action and change. You're here because you don't want to pass on a pattern of self destruction, hiding, and not speaking your truth to your daughters. You're here because you're done feeling stuck, living a mediocre life as a half woman. You're here because you are done struggling and, frankly, can no longer afford to feel like crap. Each week, I will be here for you, dropping a healthy dose of inspiration and motivation, as well as introducing you to my brilliant guests, where we will dive deep into all things womanhood, feminine power, energy, psychology, holistic and alternative health, food, nutrition, hormones, fitness, mindset, motherhood, relationships, sex, business, and much more. So, Mama, are you ready to take back control of your health? Let's do this. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Confident, Energized, and Sexy Mama podcast. This is Dorit Palvanov, your host. Today on the show, I am doing something I actually didn't plan to do. However, um, I was requested by my community to share my story. And in particular, the story I never thought I would tell, the story I didn't even know that mattered. And yet, last week I was interviewed on a podcast, and the host asked me a question that made me think. She asked me, how did my life before becoming a mom um, affected the way I coped as a parent? And I thought that was such an interesting question. And for sure, of course, I've dealt with a lot of issues, and I've had to learn how to master my emotions and how to understand my emotions and how to get control, how to feel in control of my feelings and emotions, and this roller coaster that I was on. But that question helped me to connect the dots, because everything just made so much sense. Um, and my intention in telling and sharing this story, and believe me, this is really terrifying for me, because it involves me sharing and talking about my parents and about my family of origin, and I really want to be um, respectful of their privacy and also of their humanity. And so, before I get into my story, I just want to let you know that I am not doing this because I have any grudge against my parents or against my family members, or that I'm blaming them in some way. I'll be totally honest, I have gone through that already. Um, it was, I think it was maybe a decade where I was stuck in that feeling of, it was kind of like a fusion between why was I born to these people? Um, I wish I had other parents. And also just not being able to let go of the blame and the guilt, and they should have done a better job and as parents, and if they parented me this way, I would end up this way. Like, I'm sure you also are having, or maybe in the past had these thoughts. These thoughts are normal. They're I'm not saying they're healthy, but they are just part of aware, being an aware human being. Um, and for me, it was even more important to kind of dismantle these feelings because they stood in my way from really showing up for my kids. And if you've heard me ever talking about how I'm learning to raise my daughters alongside raising myself, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. Um, and as I share more of my story, I think it will make more and more sense. So I think I want you to approach this story with compassion, with with awareness, and also I hope this will give you the permission to look really, really further back in your own journey, in your own life journey, and see how could things be connected in terms of the way you are um, showing up to your life. Where in your life have you exhibited the most confidence, and then when was this confidence either taken away from you, or quote in quotes, where do you feel like you've lost it? And it's the same goes true with energy and passion for life and all of those things. So I think we're ready. So let's dive right into it. So my story begins in 1983. That's the year I was born. I was born in October 19th, 1983, to very middle class family, Jewish Russian family. Um, and my mom was 21 when I was born. My dad was 24. And in my culture, we have this tradition where the youngest son has to stay either in his parents' home, or if he buys a home, he, I guess, is expected to take his parents with him. And I guess it's a form of, respecting your parents. And so because my dad is the only son, my dad has himself and his sister, my aunt. And when she got married, my dad remained in my grandparents' home. And so when my dad was married, he brought his bride to their home. And so when I was born, we were living with our grandparents. And when I was born, I was this, and again, this is my mom's stories. She said I was very, very, very energetic. I was very bubbly and feisty kid, laughed a lot. Um, and I'm going to add here that before I was born, my dad really, really, really wanted a boy. And so my mom actually was pregnant before me, and she lost that pregnancy. And so nobody really knows the sex of that baby, but my mom believes that it was a boy. And for whatever reason, she wasn't able to maintain that pregnancy. And then a year later, she got pregnant with me, and I was born. And so right there and then, of course, there was a lot of, everybody were happy that, I was born. However, there was this slight kind of like, oh, too bad, I wish she was a boy. And I, at the time, of course, I didn't know that. I just learned that as I was growing older, it was just kind of like a recurrent theme in my family. And my dad, by the way, is in his mid 60s and he's still waiting for a boy. But anyways, and so then I started walking when I was 10 months old, started talking when I was a year old. I loved singing. I was very, very, I wasn't shy. I guess you can still say that about me. And so when I was in daycare and in school system, even though it was quote unquote a very anti-Semite environment and school system, and I was we were living amongst Russians, and Russians are very often very bright skinned and have blue eyes and blonde hair. And my grandmother used to always tell me how they would in the Russian tradition there is also a Santa Claus, but he also has a granddaughter. If you speak Russian, then you would know I'm going to say it. It's called Snegurочка. So his granddaughter. And I was, year after year, I was cast to play that part in the Christmas shows. And my grandmother always made jokes because I was always, not totally dark skinned, but I was, not blonde, and I didn't have blue eyes. But because I was very theatrical and I could, memorize long texts easily, my teachers always cast me for that role. And so that was me. That was my childhood. I had a pretty, I have pretty good memories from that time. I did fairly well in school. I went to school for about 6 months in Russia, so I know a little bit. I know, how to read and write in Russian, just a tiny bit. And then my story really pivots around age 6. So when I was 6 years old, and I guess it started a little bit before also, but my neighborhood, and we lived in very kind of like condensed Jewish neighborhoods where a lot of Jewish people and a lot of, cousins and siblings and parents lived kind of like in the same area. And so these neighborhoods started getting attacked by the Uzbeks, and they were basically burning people's homes. They would come, in the middle of the night, bang loudly on people's doors and demand everybody to get out. And they would throw, I think they're called Molotov bottles, into the homes and basically burning homes down.
And that was extremely traumatic for people. And we've had family members who've had this done for them. Now imagine standing in front of your home, all of your memories, all of your pictures, all of your stuff being burnt down right in front of your eyes, and your kids are right there. What do you do? And so my parents it was really just a matter of time before it happens to us too. And so at the time, it was 1990 when my dad decided that it's time to flee. And I remember that moment when my father, and in my journaling, I often refer to that moment in time when I lost my dad. And I was really, really, really close with my father. I remember him taking me, to different, he always took me with him in his car. I was always with him. I was always around. We just had this very strong connection. But around that time, because of him stepping into the role of hunter, and to save us, and to keep and to provide safety for all of us, I remember just kind of like getting him taken away from him, having him being taken away from me. And so my dad was working really hard to get that visa to go to Israel. But the condition was that we are not allowed, and not just us, nobody was allowed to take anything valuable, meaning money, jewelry, nothing valuable except for just like stuff, and clothes. If we decide to leave the country, because I don't know if if you know the history of the region, but they were under communist structure, and the politics were just terrible. It was such a mess in that region at the time. And my parents decided, yeah, of course they would say yes. It's really about the safety of us and them and all of us. And so that was the first time when my parents had to leave. And I refer to that moment as their first experience of PTSD, of post-traumatic stress disorder. Even though my parents are not, aware of this, but it is very, very clear to me that they have this condition, that they have experienced that condition, and it makes total sense that they would have it. Because imagine yourself building, going to schools, learning a language, and then starting a business. My dad at the time, he had a mechanic shop. And my mom and dad just bought a house. It was just like, in those forming years of a young family, and then boom, it's gone. And you are thrown into a new country. Yes, it is the Holy Land, and it is the country of the Jewish people. However, my parents didn't get to that country because of patriotic reasons or Zionist reasons. They got to the country because they just needed safety. So you could call that basically being refugees. I think you could say. But I remember my parents struggling immensely in Israel, in the Holy Land, because they didn't know the language, and the culture was so radically different. My parents constantly complained that it was really, really hard to make a living. And another added burden was the fact that my grandparents were living with us. And so my dad had to provide for, his family, for us. So it was my sister and I. My sister, I didn't mention, but my sister was born 2 years after me. Um, and so there was, our family and also two additional adult mouths to feed. And so my dad was under immense stress. He, I believe my dad has learning disabilities because he never did well in school, and he was scolded for that. My grandparents, interestingly or ironically, are both scholars. My grandfather had a PhD. My grandmother was the only child out of 10 kids who went to university and who had a diploma and a degree. And so they were both scholars, and all of a sudden they have, their oldest son is born, and he has, I think my dad has ADD and also learning disabilities. And so just imagine for yourself this state. And that was way back. My dad was born in 1957. Nobody was talking about emotional intelligence, and Dr. Shafali wasn't even born then. There was no conscious parenting movement. Nobody was talking about that stuff. And the Russian way of upbringing is mostly shame and scolding, and it was very, very, very rigid. And so that's how my dad was raised. I remember even my grandfather many times putting him down, not because he doesn't love his son, just because that's how he knew to parent. And he did that because he was hoping that, you know, my dad, I guess, would come to his senses and would, do the right thing, quote in quotes. Of course, it doesn't work that way. And so my dad's resentment and anger and fear and stress was like starting to escalate and escalate. And eventually, excuse me, that led to really severe and serious outbursts at home. And they became more and more frequent. So all the things, right? The anger, the stress, the PTSD, the fear, the trauma, all of those things are now hosted inside of my father's body. And the way he knows to cope is through anger, is through yelling, is through just really uncontrollable emotional outbursts. And they are, you know, becoming more and more frequent. And in that time, we are, my sister and I are in our forming years. I was 6.5 when we came to Israel. My sister was 4. And we, are growing to experience all of that. And so I grew up walking on eggshells. That's basically how I can express that. It was just a moment of time before another, fit is going to happen, or another argument is going to happen. And so in that sense, I didn't feel safe, and I didn't feel calm and centered and control and just, like I have somebody I can rely on emotionally. And as we were growing up, eventually at around 1995, my parents decided to visit my mom's family in Canada. So some people fled to Israel, some people fled to the United States, and some people from our community in Russia fled to Canada. And so my mom's aunt fled here, and my mom wanted to visit her. She was very close with this aunt. And so my mom and dad, for the first time in I think that was their basically honeymoon, um, they came to visit, and my dad got immediately hooked. And I think he got hooked, now that I'm thinking about this retrospectively, is because life in Canada is nothing like life in Israel. It's very calm. It's very, the pace is much, much slower here. And I think he got attracted to that. And his catalyst was his health, because in Israel, he developed a debilitating asthma. Not surprising, right? Obviously, your immunity goes down the moment you are under so much stress, and so for him, it was manifested through asthma, especially during the summer times. Heat in Israel is intolerable. Um, and so he decided right there and then that he is going to do whatever it takes to move his family to Canada. And so from that moment on, it took a decade, it took 10 years for my dad to actualize his dream. And he worked so hard, and he worked, I remember him going to work. He worked in a car garage from 6 in the morning until 6 in the evening, and then he would come home, eat, and go outside, and continue fixing cars in the parking lot of our apartment building. He just continued seeing his own clients, and so these clients, and he would work until 10, 11 a.m. at night. My dad really worked like a donkey, and whatever money he made working, in the side hustle, that paid for lawyers and immigration consultants and agencies and all that. It was a long, long journey, but eventually he did it. But in that time, so now that you know a little bit about my dad's character, um, we continued having arguments, and my home was basically just like like a pressure cooker. It was just a matter of time, and not only because that's my dad's coping mechanism, that's how he copes emotionally, but also because we were living with our grandparents, and my grandparents, basically two families, and two families with very different values, and they were constantly bumping against one another. So that's my dad, and that's how I grew up. And I do want to tell you a little bit about my mom. So my mom, she is, oh my gosh, I love my mom so much. I've always loved her, and I will always love her. And yet, I remember my mom being under so much fear that every time she wanted something else, every time she wanted to change, the circumstances we lived under and at our home, I just remember those moments when she would just be debilitated, or just overwhelmed with fear and this inability to move. And now that I'm learning about patriarchy stress disorder, and I'm learning so much about mental health and PTSD, for sure, both my parents have PTSD, and trauma, immense trauma from everything that they've encountered, and the genetic imprint that they, the trauma that was transmitted in, genetically. And now that we know about the research and about epigenetics and how trauma travels in our DNA, it can travel all the way, back, all the way 7 generations back. And that makes you think. And so my mom, it's really hard for me to talk about my mom without thinking about my grandmother, her mom, and then her mom, and so on and so forth, because these are the clues. So I feel like my mom always wanted to change and always wanted to advocate for herself and for us. And many, many times she wanted to leave my dad because she knew that, living like this is just not healthy. But I remember when I was a little bit older, um, my mom would constantly say, "No, I can't leave him. Like, what am I going to do with two kids? Or nobody needs me with two kids." Um, like those kinds of, thought patterns. And of course, again, I'm not judging her and I don't blame her, but I understand. I really do understand that fear. Um, and not being able to cope and not being able to um, have that level of stewardship over yourself. And then, so that's my mom. I guess you could say that she was mostly in victim mentality. um, I don't have an experience of my mom being like, it's okay, we're gonna get through this, we'll figure this out, we will, I don't remember that kind of mindset. My mom wasn't that kind of person. Instead, she was very much kind of like taking my dad's lead. uh, and that's how we lived, and that's how my sister and I grew up. And then uh, year 2000 hit. um, that's when I was 17 years old. And that's when my little sister, my baby sister, was born. Now she's 20 years old. She just turned 20 last month. Um, but that's when my baby sister was born. And I remember when she was born, she brought so much joy to our family. Um, and we were just so happy. It was such a breath of fresh air for us. That little baby, and I was so engaged in raising her, and I was just so happy. And I remember my whole my whole teenage time was mostly taking care of her. I mean, I would rarely, be out with my friends, or, also the way I was raised, because we were such a traditional Jewish family. It is believed that girls should not be um, hanging out uh, outside of the home. Girls need to be home. And in that sense, we were pretty much domesticated. And I know some of you, that connected with me through discovery calls, you've shared that with me, how you feel domesticated. So that domestication starts, when you're a little girl, and that's how you're learning about womanhood. And then, when I got married, that, domestication, it continued for me. However, it had nothing to do with my husband. It was really me and how I expected or thought that is the right way to be a wife, or the right way to be a woman or a mom. So it was really my own crap that I had to kind of like sort through and dismantle. Um, what else can I tell you? When I was 17 years old, I met my ex-boyfriend. I don't know. I think it's a different story, but I'm going to include it here because I think it has the reason I think I attracted this man into my life was because I just needed some sort of escape from the constant, um, arguments that I've experienced at home. And he was 23 years old, so he was much older than I was. I met him when I was in 11th grade. And at the time, it seemed cool. And refreshing, and I felt so mature, having an older boyfriend. But I can share you this, and if you're listening to this, I want you to really think about yourself here, because each and every one of us has these moments. The first time we started our relationship on the phone, and then eventually we met. But the moment we met, right, the moment our bodies saw each other, I remember this visceral feeling of no, he is not for me. And yet I went against every single sign and signal that my body was giving me. And instead, I became emotionally involved and I fell in love. And, we became more and more deeper. We went deeper and deeper into relationship. And this relationship from the very beginning was just not healthy. It was not healthy. We fought all the time. We constantly had disagreements. We had such different values. You know, um, we always, because I was, domesticated, I always was very family oriented, and I wanted the family. I wanted kids, and I wanted to stay home with the kids, and he viewed family life completely differently. I wanted a big family. He wanted just a couple of kids. And he was also he was a womanizer. And even though I was adored by him, and he was just like, he worshipped me, we could say. But at the same time, I was so terrified of going out with him because he could not keep his eyes off of other women. And that was so hard for me to just accept. And that was another huge, clash between us. So there was a lot of, trauma happening, with that relationship as well. Um, and so, and then when I was 18 and a half, closer to 19, I was drafted to the Israeli military. Um, and in the Israeli military, we were, so just a little background. In Israel, every boy or girl who finish high school, they are obligated to serve the country. And so boys serve for 3 years, girls serve for 2. And I decided I'm going to go to the army. And so I was drafted to the army. I had an amazing experience in the army. And so, just a side note, throughout this whole time, whatever is happening, my dad is still working hard and still, determined to move to Canada. But, he's getting denials and rejections one after the other. No, no, no. So at the time, he already felt a little discouraged. And my mom and I started looking for, ways out. And I remember my mom wanting to figure out the living conditions that we were living. So at the time, we were living in this tiny, teeny apartment, a 4-bedroom apartment. Well, actually, 3-bedroom apartments. And my sister and I were sharing a room. So I was, at the time, was already 21 years old. And I was still living in my, together with my sister in the same room. So we were super tight, like terrible living conditions. I must say. But my dad was determined. He is living. He is leaving this country. So he didn't want to invest, in our living conditions, or he didn't want to invest into anything new, because he knows, and he knew, and he was right, that we are leaving, that we will leave this country. And so I was already 21 years old. I finished my army duty. And I remember that day coming home from from the bus. So I came off the bus from, a day in the army, and I was walking home and I see this yellow envelope, and I was terrified to see, the sender, who it's from, and I see that it's from the government of Canada. And I remember I needed, like, I think a minute or two to just stand there and stare at it, because I could not believe. And I must say that I was actually the one who was excited about moving. Um, I was the only one who actually supported my dad, my mom, my sister, my grandparents. They were all against it. And again, think about, whatever you already know about my mom. She was always in so much fear. I feel like fear is the my mom's kind of like compass in life. And of course, it's not, a healthy way to live. But now that you have that, knowledge about my mom, this is what it is. And so, um, she immediately, when she heard my dad wanting to leave, she said no, because of her PTSD and because of the trauma, of the first immigration. And so, of course, you don't want to go through this again. And so I remember that moment, standing, downstairs, um, with holding this envelope, and then eventually going upstairs. And my mom was home, and I showed this to her, and she was like also shocked. And there was this moment where it was kind of like a bittersweet moment, where we were happy that actually, like, it's happening, and my dad did it, but also we don't want to leave, or she doesn't want to leave, because for her, leaving, it means she has to leave her parents, she has to leave her siblings, like, she has to leave everything. And also, she was working at this, you know at a job she really, really loved. Um, and my mom had always had, um, struggled, professionally. It was really, she worked. Oh my gosh, I think she tried all the different jobs, and she tried to go to like a nursing school, and it didn't work out. And my mom tried to go into the financial sector. It didn't work out. She tried telemarketing, didn't work out. She tried even, network marketing, didn't work out. Like, she tried so many things. And yet now, in my conversations with her now, she tells me that she had always known, and she had always wanted to become an esthetician, and to, work with her hands, and do facials and that kind of stuff. And that's what my mom does now. But she only had the courage to go after her dreams in her mid 40s. And so, anyways, so this envelope, and so, I remember the moment when we were like, okay, let's hide this. We're not going to show this to dad. But then I said, no, mom, we have to show it to him. So we showed it to him eventually, and he was so happy. And so that's it. It was just a matter of time. Um, Packing all the luggage, it was really, really, really quick. And within 6 months, we left. We left the country. And so that was our second immigration. I was 21 at the time. My little sister was 5. My middle sister was 19. And, she still, no, she was 18, because I remember she just had to finish her last 6 months in high school. So she came with us to Canada, and then she came back to Israel for another 6 months, and then she joined us back here again. And so that is basically my story. And then we went through second immigration. Of course, the second immigration was so much easier, because, the world evolved and changed. Now we know what credit cards are, and, how to transfer money. My parents could finally take the money they've earned in Israel and bring it here. So that was a big, big, big thing, because from Russia to Israel, we were not allowed to take, any money with us. Imagine what it is to start a life in a new country with no money. Like, I cannot even imagine. and then leaving your home. They couldn't even sell their home. They just left it to the neighbors. Terrible, terrible stuff. Um, anyway, so we came to Canada, and I immediately started. I immediately registered into university. So I got my undergrad degree. Thankfully, my English was always, I always had a good English. My grandmother is an English teacher, so I guess I have that in my genes. And also, I did fairly well at school. I've always been an A student. Um, and so when we came to Canada, so I was 21 years old when we got here, and I met my husband when I was 23. And 2 years later, we got married. So everything for me happened really quickly. And I feel like everything I'm sharing with you today, it wasn't even a thing. I didn't even think about those things until I became a mom. And so motherhood was the can opener for me. And it opened a can of worms. It opened the trauma, it opened the PTSD, it opened the stress. And I have noticed that I had learned to cope with stressful situations with yelling and fear and anger. And yet here I was, safe. I didn't have to worry about, about money at the time, because thankfully my husband, he owned a business, and he provided for us. So I didn't have, and I didn't went through, immigration. Like I didn't have all the things that my parents went through. And yet it's almost like that's the toolkit that I brought from home. I didn't know any better. And so it was really my I had to learn. Everything was new. And I've always had this interest in psychology. And I always, and I still do, loved books and reading and learning. And so motherhood was that catalyst for me that basically, made me really dive deep into myself, and sort through that pain and trauma and stress that I was under. One of the hardest things that I had to sort through was the fight and flight response that I was under. And I did that. I figured that I had that through hormonal testing. So when I did the Dutch test, it showed me how my adrenals, how I have a stress response that is in a loop. And that was pretty cool to see. And the second time I did the Dutch test, after doing some therapy work, after doing coaching and journaling and some somatic, work, I noticed that this stress response was it was eliminated, and that was so cool. And I honestly, I didn't need that test. It was just to see, like, in numbers how it is. But actually, I just felt so much better. So I didn't need to yell, or I didn't need to, lose my shit every time the kids triggered me a little bit. And I finally was on a road to healing myself, and to healing my relationship with my kids, and to becoming the wife and the woman, the wife and the mother that I want to be. And so this is it. This is my story. This is my, I guess I can call it, this is my burnout story. This is my healing from burnout story. And again, I'm sharing this with you because we all have history. We all carry with each other, with ourselves, baggage from the past. And I remember being in that space, and I've been in that space for a decade, and those were the forming those were the years I basically, made babies. I've had 3 kids in 10 years, and in that time, raising them, and first of all, conceiving them and carrying them and birthing them and then raising them. Oh my gosh, I've learned so much about myself. And the number one thing that I've always struggled with, so that was, I guess, my burnout. It was energy. It had always been energy. My go-to was, oh gosh, I don't have any power. I can do this. I can't do this. So it was kind of like a combination between what I've learned from my mom, from her fear response and her lack of belief in herself, and the fact that she was mainly stuck in victim mentality. Not so much anymore, by the way, because now she has built herself, and I feel like this move to Canada was so good for all of us. um, but then that was my toolkit. That's how I knew how to cope, and so I was in victim mentality so many years of my life, and the way I knew to cope with stressful situations was through just like yelling and being getting into that space of rage and anger. And I didn't like myself like that. I didn't want to be that person. So I had to unlearn, and I had to heal, and I had to teach myself new strategies. And that's when I was really drawn to holistic modalities of health and healing. And I went into nutrition school. I became a nutritionist, and I started eating healthier, and I started, following quote unquote, healthier eating regimes. And yet I was still stuck. I didn't feel like I knew how to replenish my energy and restore myself. So food was great, but food wasn't the thing. It wasn't the reason. It was just a piece of the puzzle. And it was only when I really started being deliberate about my energy, um, as a woman, as a female, when everything changed for me. So when I learned from Dr. Christian Northrup about the 4 phases of the menstrual cycle, and how this is, this is our God-given superpower for a sustainable life as a woman, as a female, and how when you learn to live in alignment with your cycle, it's just impossible for you to get into a space of burnout, because rest is such an integral part of the system. Rest and rejuvenation, and being alone, and being in solitude, right? And so all the feelings of shame and selfishness and guilt, mom guilt, we all feel that. All of this was dissipated for me, because I realized that, oh my gosh, like I can totally, it's like, it's okay. It's actually what I'm supposed to do for my own sake and for my kids, is to take care of myself, is to, spend time on myself. It's to read a book. It's maybe to maybe, take a bath, or maybe go for a walk, or maybe it is, moving my body, it's stretching. Maybe it's eating, really lively food, or maybe it's hydrating myself, maybe it's water, maybe it's some physical touch, being touched in a loving way. And so that's where my core desired feeling was born. And that's how when I was working with my coaches, I had to be really honest with myself and what I want. And I've discovered that my core desired feeling is flow. I just want to live in the flow. I don't want stagnation. I don't want fighting. I don't want arguments. I don't want resistance. I just want to design a life of flow for myself. And that's what I had done. And that's what I'm still doing. Everything, the way I live in my life, starting from the way I raise my kids, to the way I get them to help me, with chores in the house, to how I plan my meals, to my relationship with my husband, to the work that I've chosen to do. The reason I've chosen to work from home is because I don't want to be in traffic. Because being in traffic is a form of stagnation for me, and it sucks energy out of me. And so my entire life right now is basically in alignment with my four phases, with the female energy system. And that's how I live, and that's what I teach. Um, and and that's, and I see that it's been life changing for me, and it's definitely life changing for my clients. And I think that's it. That's my story. And like I said, we all have stories. We all carry, very unique stories from the past, from our childhood. And if you think that your childhood doesn't affect you, you are in denial. We all, learn. It's like when we're little, we are gathering tools to um, to cope with, with life, and to cope with, in adulthood. And it was definitely the case for me. And so here I was with these tools that some of them were really helpful. So the grit, the survival, the tenacity, all of those things, as somebody who went through two immigrations, yes, for sure, that's what I've learned from my parents. But I've also had some tools that were just obsolete for me, and I did not want to, use them and keep perpetuating the same kind of feeling in my home. And so here I was, um, paving my own way and living the life that I wanted to live. And it's, rewiring my brain, and learning from, other amazing women, and creating my own wise council of women. And now I'm finally in the space where I am headed into, living more confidently, and with so much more energy and so much more passion in life, to the point where finally, after so many years, I can, we can put our kids to bed and enjoy intimacy, and enjoy, some fun, sexy time. And I remember how, that was not even like, it wasn't even a thing. Like, all I wanted was to sleep. And yes, having small, young kids is a part of it. I'm not going to lie. But a lot of it also was, I just didn't know how to replenish and restore myself. I didn't know how to communicate it, my needs with my partner. I didn't know how to communicate it with my kids. I just didn't know. And so you don't know what you don't know. And now that I know, I am so grateful that I get to teach this to women. So if this is something that is interesting to you, please reach out to me. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is @DoritPalvanov Let me know what resonated, if my story resonated with you. Where, did you see yourself in this story? And the other thing is, if you want to learn about the feminine energy system and how to use that in your life, then I am about to relaunch another iteration of my signature program, Energized. It's going to be a 4-week immersion into, that system, into learning to understand the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle, the energetics of your cycle. We are going to be talking in greater detail about how to live in alignment with your cycle, how to move your body, how to connect with people. I have some really cool PDFs and cheat sheets that I've created, and some really powerful videos that I've created. You're going to learn how to communicate this with your kids. You're going to learn how to communicate it with your partner and with other people in your life. And we're going to finish off with, I'm going to teach you how to master ovulation, because the menstrual cycle, we all think that, menstruation is the main event, and actually it's not. Menstruation is when your cycle culminates, it's when it ends. However, what the most important part of the menstrual cycle is to have a healthy ovulation. So I absolutely have to teach you how to ovulate healthily. I'm going to teach you how to measure your basal body temperature, how to inspect your cervical mucus, and how to decipher your cervical positioning for the sake of knowing when do you ovulate, how well do you ovulate. You're going to learn to use to read and decipher your body fluids to know where, how your estrogen and progesterone are doing in the body. So you are going to gain the tools that will help you to restore energetically, and through learning to understand your hormones. That's what it's all about. And so it's kind of like a fusion between a health program and a energy training and coaching. And this is the thing that I had used, and I'm still using in my own life. And that's the system that I teach my clients to restore and to live sustainably as a woman. And of course, looking at your looking into your past, and healing some emotional and mental stuff that you've accumulated from your past. It's just a part of it. It's just a piece of it. And so I'm so excited to relaunch this program. Let me know if you're interested. I am looking for a cohort group to try this program out before I relaunch it. So if you're interested, please send me a DM via Instagram, and we can talk about this. And I think that's it. I'm already, I think I've been talking for an hour, and it's 7 a.m. It's so funny. My kids are still sleeping, but I had to get this out for you. I have a really full day today. And so if you have any questions, please let me know. If you are interested in participating in the program, please let me know also. And that's it. I hope you are going to have a wonderful rest of day. I'm sending you off with so much love, so much gentleness, many, many, many blessings, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.
Wait, before you go, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and if you did, I want to know about it. So snap a picture of you listening to this episode and share it on Instagram or Facebook. On Instagram, you can tag me at Dorit Palvanov Coaching. So Dorit is spelled as Dorit, and Palvanov spelled as Palvanov Coaching, so it's all one word. Or you can use the hashtag Confident, Energized, and Sexy Mama Podcast. You see, my personal goal beyond having amazing conversations with guests or hosting solo episodes is to increase the visibility for this platform and these messages to be shared and heard by women who need it the most. And there's no way that I can do this on my own. So I'm asking you, the incredible community of confident, energized, and sexy mamas, to help me with this goal. So whether you're coming to me through iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the show from, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. This would mean the world to me, and it's so helpful for other mothers who are looking for this information. So thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.